Hold on to yourselves. This one's gonna be a bit of a bumpy ride. Oh, hello. I'm Fenric the Forgotten Wolf, and I'm going to talk about the public misperceptions of the furry fandom. But before we get into that, hello, my name is Fenric. I am the Forgotten Wolf. I am a new furry and a new YouTube content creator. Actually, I have been a furry for 1 year at this point. But I'm still gonna consider that new. So take that into consideration with everything you are going to hear in this video. Some of which is just my own opinion, okay? Now, other furry YouTubers have done similar videos, but this is gonna be my take on this subject. Now, my furry friends, we are going to stray into a topic of discussion here that I rarely talk about on my channel. So I am in a little bit of uncharted territory here, but we're just going to go for it and we'll see how it goes. Okay, all right? Okay, do you want to know my take on why the furry fandom is so misunderstood and often seen negatively by some of the general public? Well, of course you do. Why else would you be here? So, let's just dive right in, shall we? All right, my furry friends, so why are furries so misunderstood? Well, it's no secret that many in the general public hold negative perceptions of the furry fandom. I would argue mostly due to stereotypes, media portrayals, and misunderstandings, often associating being a furry with deviant behavior or fetishism, despite this community just being largely creative, inclusive, and mostly harmless. That's not to say that there aren't nuggets of truth in some of these ideas, but from what I've seen, they are way over-exaggerated and blown way out of proportion. Now, I do think there are generally a few things that spark these negative perceptions from the public, though, okay? And I'm going to run through them here. Now, first of all, certainly there is how the media portrays us. Mainstream outlets have often sensationalized furry conventions or highlighted fringe cases, reinforcing the idea that furries are disruptive or creepy. And then you have the fictionalized accounts, like the infamous CSI episode, that really did not do us any favors. Okay, I know, my furry friends, that is a very long time ago now. And it's weird to say it, but I feel like some of the damage caused by that is still lingering. And then you have morning show hosts laughing at the fact that furries are the victim of a chlorine gas attack. Whether it's fiction or just the frickin' news. Like, our portrayals in the media have historically, not always been good. Okay, my furry friends, we are going to talk about the topic of NSFW in the furry fandom. There's no way I was going to be able to make a video about this without going here, and it actually gets a little bit worse, my furry friends, so stay with me, okay? Stay with me here. All right. It is most certainly a common misconception that all furries are only motivated in the fandom by sexual interests. Obviously, my furry friends, adult content within the realm of the furry fandom exists. I am not going to stand here and lie to you and say that it doesn't. That's stupid. However, my furry friends, this represents only a portion of the fandom, okay? I feel like this stereotype often unfairly overshadows the majority of those in the fandom who are really just focused on art, storytelling, and community. But this is definitely a major factor here, my furry friends, okay? We'll get into why that is in a bit. Alright, my furry friends, then we have the fact that some might associate the furry fandom with much darker and more extreme forms of deviance. I had a really hard time finding the right words to discuss this part because some things are just very problematic to even mention on YouTube, okay? So this is one of those times where I'm going to have to be a little bit vague and just say that there are certain inappropriate behaviors that by and large we absolutely do not tolerate in the furry community, but the myths of which have somehow persisted. This is a damaging and false stereotype that stigmatizes the fandom. Heck, there was even a recent documentary series about this very issue. This is kind of a hard one to change opinions on, especially when, just like any other big group of people, there are going to be some bad apples. But for the most part, the fandom does a pretty good job of calling these individuals out when they become known. Now, okay, my furry friends, there is something else, all right? There is also the matter of some of the public taking issue with the fact that we're dressing up as often cute and cuddly animals. The argument is that since cute and cuddly animals are something that might be appealing to children, and given that the fandom does have quite a prominent NSFW side, some have used this as a way to negatively represent the fandom as trying to indoctrinate children or something ridiculous along those lines. Now, my furry friends, I have only been to two furry conventions so far, and they were both all-age cons, okay? Now, when there were 18 plus panels or there was a curfew at the dance party, those were strictly enforced. From what I have seen, the fandom does a really good job of keeping minors in areas that are age appropriate and restricting them from places that are not, often with special rules for minors and their guardians at cons that are meant to keep everyone safe. I've actually been quite impressed by this. But without this knowledge and understanding, one can see where, maybe some of these fears are coming from. Now, my furry friends, we come to one that I think really does come down to there being a nugget of truth here, okay? And that's the idea that we all engage in disruptive behavior at furry conventions and events. I mean, we apparently wreck hotel suites, wear inappropriate outfits in public, and do unspeakable things to pizza. Yes, okay. It is a well-documented fact that all of those things I just mentioned actually happened. But my furry friends, incidents like these at conventions are often overly exaggerated, sometimes by the fandom itself even, which might cause some to paint us as being socially awkward and disruptive. Now look, I know furries like to party, okay? But at cons and events, come on, y'all, at least try to behave, because when you don't, it might end up being overly amplified in a way that becomes problematic for all of us. Alright? Enough of my mini rant there. And finally, I think we sometimes get a negative perception from the public just because of the fear of the unfamiliar. Anthropomorphic animal characters can seem kind of unusual to those unfamiliar with our culture, leading to discomfort or ridicule. Now, my furry friends, I myself was heckled when I was walking around the town of Ocean Shores in full fursuit during the weekend of Furvana, okay? That was an experience, I have to say. But yeah, sometimes it's nothing that we're doing, it's just because we are. Alright, so if the furry fandom has been around for so long now, then why the hell do these negative perceptions and false stereotypes actually persist? Well, I think there's a couple of reasons. First of all, it likely comes down to what this kind of thing almost always comes down to, and that's ignorance and speculation. People often judge what they don't understand, and pair that now with just general internet culture, and you will find online communities that are, set up to amplify anti-furry sentiment through memes and trolling and sometimes even harassment campaigns. The furry fandom's unique culture makes us a really easy target for speculation and mockery. This past year alone, in my country, this has even spilled over into the political arena, with anti-furry legislation being introduced in multiple states. Yeah, I wish I was kidding about this one, my furry friends. Oh, thankfully, sanity prevailed and none of those ridiculous bills actually passed. Yeah. It turns out that furries do not actually want to use litter boxes after all. Oh, my goodness, my furry friends. All right. Secondly, my furry friends, we have the fact that outsiders to the furry fandom might only encounter the most sensational or NSFW aspects of our culture, unfortunately missing the broader creative and more community-centered aspects. I almost hate to say it, but I feel like this one might be just a little bit on us, because it does seem to me, my furry friends, to be that the party animals are often the most visible. I am not making any judgments here. Y'all know I like to party. I'm just saying, okay? If you think I'm getting this part wrong, let me know down in the comments. Now, for those of us that are furries, we know what this fandom is really about. But for anyone watching this that might be new to the community or hearing some of this for the first time, let me tell you about the reality of the furry fandom. First and foremost, we are a fandom built on creative expression. Furries engage in art, fursuit making, music, storytelling, and, well, even making YouTube videos, right? This fandom is built on art, creativity, and expression. At the end of the day, we are just fans of anthropomorphic animal characters. Now, there are a lot of ways that the furry fandom has a positive impact. Conventions like Anthrocon, for example, raise significant funds for charity, and they bring economic benefits to the cities that host them. Even smaller conventions and events often do quite well in raising money for local charities. I have seen this firsthand. There is a lot of good here. But for me personally, the most important way the furry fandom makes a positive impact is through community and inclusivity. This fandom is incredibly diverse, with strong LGBTQ representation and a welcoming environment for those who feel like they are marginalized. I have heard so many stories about the positive impact the furry fandom has had on people, And I would definitely count myself amongst those whose lives have changed for the better due to this community. This is what we're really about, my friends. Positivity. All right, my furry friends, so to sum this up, the negative perception of furries is largely rooted in stereotypes and misinformation, not in the reality of the fandom. While some outsiders focus on the NSFW or other fringe elements, the broader furry community thrives on creativity, inclusivity, and positive social impact. Every furry needs to understand this gap between perception and reality, because this is likely key to challenging stigma and fostering tolerance as we move forward. The furry fandom actively counters negative public perception through charity work, positive media engagement, and reframing our narrative around creativity and inclusivity. These strategies highlight our community's real values and hopefully help to dismantle some of the harmful stereotypes of the past. It's an uphill climb, my furry friends, okay? It is really an uphill climb. And there is still a lot of work to do. But at the end of the day, what we're really all about is creativity, inclusivity, kindness, and joy. And there is nothing wrong with that, my furry friends. All right. Questions, opinions, remarks, put them in the comments. I'm staying wolfy, my furry friends.